This video is going to be controversial. Now, the other day an image was posted, one that I often look for when a new set comes out, like Astral Radiance, and that is the pull rates image, which can be found, I think, on TCG Player with stats after opening 8,000 packs. And those rates look tough. But whenever a new Pokemon set comes out, we are always given a handful of pre-release openings from various bigger YouTube channels as well. These often come out in the days leading up to release or right around release day, and they always have crazy good pulls. Almost too good. Now, I don't want to be negative, but is it possible that there's something else at play here? Are all the pre-release boxes huge hitters, or maybe just some of them? Do the pre-release boxes follow a similar pattern to boxes opened by normal everyday people? These are things that I want to find out, but I'm curious to hear what you think we're going to find, so leave me a comment down below and be sure to subscribe and hit the bell while you're at it. I want to dive into this with some actual stats and form an opinion based off of that. But to be clear, ultimately, it's just my opinion. I also want to be very upfront that I am not saying that some of these big YouTubers are trying to scam you or anything like that. I think this community is full of a lot of good people, even at the very top. And we'll actually talk at the end about things that could be happening if these are the results that we find, so be sure to stick around for that. So for this video, I poured through booster box openings that happened before or right around the release of Astral Radiance by larger YouTube channels. 7 of them to be exact. And the assumption here is that the booster box was provided by the Pokemon Company, which, as I understand it, is something that happens for most releases to build up hype, which I love. And most, if not all, of these YouTubers did declare that at the beginning of their video, which I appreciate. So the benchmarks that I want to keep track of and compare here are overall hits, which include holo rares. And then I also want to break out how many ultra rares or above are pulled, which would include V-stars, rainbows, full arts, golds, alt arts, as well as the trainer gallery cards. I also want to note how many top 10 most expensive cards from the set were pulled, if any. Lastly, to be fair, I am taking the results from the very first box opening video that I can find on each channel if there happen to be multiple. Let's get into it. So looking at the larger YouTubers, we have Leonard with 22 pulls, 7 of which were ultra or above, and 3 of which in the top 10. Twice Baked Jake with 24 pulls, 13 ultras, 2 in the top 10. Deep Pocket Monster with 21 pulls, 8 ultras, and 0 in the top 10. Frosted Caribou, 20 pulls, 7 ultras, 2 in the top 10. Unlisted Leaf, 22, 10 ultras, 2 in the top 10. Danny Phantom, 21 pulls, 9 ultras, and 1 in the top 10. And finally, Tricky Jim with 18 pulls, 9 ultras, and 1 in the top 10. Now, I think it's important to talk about kind of the outliers here, or kind of the top and the bottom, if you will. So for me, the top boxes are probably either Leonhardt's or Twice Baked Jake's. Twice Baked Jake had a ton of pulls and a ton of ultras, like way more than anybody else, and also 2 in the top 10. That was a pretty crazy box. Technically, based on value, Leonhardt's might be more. I didn't keep track of which of the top 10. Obviously, the top 2 or 3 would be, you know, much more than the following 7. But Leonhardt did have 3 that were in the top 10, which is pretty crazy, even though his overall ultra pulls or above were only 7, with Twice Baked Jake actually had almost double that. On the bottom end of that spectrum is probably Deep Pocket Monsters box. He had a normal amount of pulls, I would say, at the 21 mark. He actually had a few, you know, 1 more ultra, it looks like, than Leonhardt, than Frosted Caribou, but 0 in the top 10, whereas those other boxes usually made up for a low ultra count by having, you know, 1 or 2 in the top 10 of value. Now let's compare that to the average person. I'm gonna share my hits from the only booster box that I have opened so far, which you can see here. However, 1 is just simply not enough, so I'm gonna pull stats from another YouTuber, Denali Market, which does have a decent following, but they are an online store you can buy from, stuff like that. They've opened a good amount of Astral Radiance in a recent stream, and these boxes were not supplied by the Pokemon Company and were not pre-release. So to save myself the cost of buying 6 more boxes for this experiment, I'm gonna track the first 6 full booster box openings from their recent stream to help add more stats. This is what those look like. So looking at the average Joes, if you will, my box had 20 hits, 7 ultras, 0 in the top 10. And then going through Denali Market 1 through 6, the first box had 23 pulls, 10 ultras, 1 in the top 10. Second box had 19 pulls, 6 ultras, 0 in the top 10. Third box had 22 pulls, 8 ultras, and 2 in the top 10. Fourth box had 22 pulls, 9 ultras, 0 in the top 10. Fifth box had 20 pulls, 7 ultras, 1 in the top 10, and the final box had 20 pulls, 6 ultras, 0 in the top 10. Again, going over those kind of extremes on either side, the Denali Market box, either 1 or probably box 3 were kind of your high end there. Box 1 had 10 ultras, 1 in the top 10, and 23 overall pulls, which was on the high end for these boxes. Box 3 had 22 overall pulls, only 8 ultras, but 2 in the top 10. So that was probably one of your best boxes there. And the worst box was probably box number 6, with 20 overall pulls, which is about average, I would say, but only 6 ultras and 0 in the top 10. Now, when you add all those up, the pre-release YouTube boxes from big YouTubers look like this, with 148 hits overall, 63 ultras, and 11 of the top 10 cards, which averages out to 21.14 hits per box, 9 ultras per box, and over 1.5 top 10 cards per box. On the flip side, the average Joe's boxes look like this, with 146 hits overall, 53 ultras overall, and 4 cards in the top 10, with an average of 20.85 hits, 7.57 ultras, and 0.57 top 10 cards. The hits actually look very similar between the two sets. Yes, the average Joe's had 2 less hits, but that can totally just be chalked up to chance. And when we're talking hits here, these could just be a holo rare. That's the difference, right? Moving over to the ultras, and we do start to see a little bit of a difference here. The larger Pokemon YouTubers box had 63, which is 9 average. The average Joe's had 53, so 10 difference there. So not nothing, not 2 like the hits, right? Especially when the hits were in the near 150 mark. So this is a bigger percentage gap. And it's worth noting, the larger YouTube Pokemon boxes did have almost 1.5 more ultra hits than the average Joe's box. Now that ultra hit could be something that's not that valuable. That could be the difference there on most of these boxes. But on the flip side, it could be, a bigger, more valuable card. Not in the top 10 probably, but something that does have some value of recognition. And then the big difference, and this is what, does make me think that, hey, there's a chance that something's going on here, and we're gonna talk about that in a minute, is those top 10 value cards. Now, this was taken based off the top 10 when I recorded this, which was May 31st, and there were 11 hits across 7 boxes, 1.5, more than 1.5 per box in the large pre-release Pokemon YouTuber boxes, and nearly only half a card average per box, so 1 every 2 boxes, right, in the average Joe's. That's a very, very big difference. It could be chance, but it's hard to overlook. And one other important note, and this is just based off recollection, so it's possible that I'm remembering wrong, but I think if we cut that top 10 down to say top 5, like just the really big hitters that have like a large value, not the 30, mid $30 mark, something significantly higher than that, I think the average Joe's box might have 0 of those. And I think the big pre-release YouTuber boxes, they definitely had a handful. So that would be another pretty big difference if you knocked it down even further. So I know this was only 7 boxes on each side. Honestly, that was all that I could handle watching through and keeping tabs on. And while it would have always been better to have more data, this is what I've got. Now, maybe with more and more boxes, things would even out. But there are only so many pre-release videos on YouTube, and I honestly hit most of them, I felt like. And as far as what this all means, well, I guess that's up to you to decide. Now, I said from the beginning that I'm not here to call out any of the big names. I regularly watch a lot of these larger Pokemon YouTubers, and I love what they're doing. With that said, with an admittedly small sample size of 7 boxes on each side, 14 total, there does seem to be a pattern. So let's talk about the different ways that it can be explained. I'm gonna lay out a few options, but I'm curious to hear if you have any to add. So leave a comment with your thoughts down below, whether they line up with my various explanations or if you have an entirely new one. Option 1, this could all just be complete random chance. I mentioned more data would always be better, and maybe if we had 50 pre-release boxes and 50 average Joe's boxes, or maybe 100 of each, eventually, maybe they'd all average out pretty equal. Option 2, is it possible that Pokemon wants to build up hype and send stack boxes to these bigger YouTubers pre-release? And I want to be clear, that doesn't necessarily mean anything bad for these YouTubers. If this is what's happening, I'd assume they honestly don't even know. They get a box in the mail, they have an agreement with Pokemon on when to release the opening video, and bam, whoa, they got a solid box. Nothing sinister on their end, probably not 100% ethical on Pokemon's part in my opinion if that's what's happening. But actually, in fact, Twice Baked Jake's video, he specifically says that his box seems insane and that you should definitely not expect similar results. Option 3 is that some of these YouTubers want views and want hype, and what gathers views, you ask? Well, big hits. So maybe they open a few boxes and post the best one or something like that. However, I will say this would mean Pokemon sent them multiple boxes too, since it is pre-release. And while I'm not sure everyone is 100% honest all the time, just like any industry, I generally don't think this is what's happening. And option 4 is that I'm not to be trusted, that I'm faking all these numbers and none of these are real. But I guess you're just gonna have to trust me that I really have nothing to gain from that. And I assure you, I spent hours going through all these videos, and that these are accurate numbers to the best of my knowledge. Those are the realistic scenarios that I see being possible, but I'm not really certain that any one of them is what's happening. I like having the numbers to look at, and there's definitely a pattern, but again, it's a small sample size, so it's tough to draw any definitive conclusions. In any case, it's something that has been on my mind after seeing those tough pull rates posted from the 8,000 packs being opened, and then seeing non-stop hits from some of these big names. So I hope that you found this video interesting at least, and if you did, please leave a like and comment down below your thoughts on this topic. I'd love to hear from you, and I'll see you in the next video.